Hey guys, so today I wanted to start off this video by asking you all a question. Have you ever heard of the phrase, it's like the blind leading the blind? I'm sure pretty much most of you have, but for those of you who haven't heard it, the term is basically used to describe someone who asks for help and the person who is giving the assistance is equally as clueless as the person who is asking for help. So basically it's a term that's used to say, oh, these people don't know what they're doing, it's like the blind leading the blind. And the phrase might lead you to believe that people who are visually impaired don't or can't actually lead other people or guide other people. But actually I'm here to tell you today that that is a pile of rot, because we actually do lead each other, and there are actually real life cases of the blind leading the blind, quite literally. And I'm here to tell you about my first real experience of this. I didn't grow up with a massive group of disabled friends when I was at primary school. When I was at secondary school, my school had something in it called a visual impairment unit, and this unit was specialised to help people with visual impairments to be able to learn. And through this I knew quite a few people with visual impairments, although to be honest there was one person who had less sight than me, but I didn't really know a lot of people who were totally blind or who had less sight than me. So I wasn't really around a large group of people who had quite significant sight loss or less sight loss than myself. And then when I became a blogger, of course I met lots of people online who had visual impairments, and a lot of them had less sight than myself, and of course I started to talk to them and I started to socialise with them and go out with them. And there was one particular occasion where I had been at an event and I had been doing a workshop, and then afterwards I was invited to go out to have a meal in a local restaurant, and I've said yes, of course, you know, food and socialising, I'm there. So I went with this group of people to the restaurant, and actually it was a really fun afternoon because I met so many lovely people that I still talk to now and that I've formed online friendships with, and I really enjoyed myself because it was a chance to meet people who had similar experiences to myself. About halfway through the meal I wanted to use the loo, and a lot of the other girls on the table also wanted to use the loo. So I got up and I said, I'm going to go to the toilet now. And all of the girls on the table said, actually, we're going to come with you because we all need to go too. And I was like, okay, cool, let's go. And basically one of the girls held onto my arm and said, oh, I'm going to grab onto your arm. I was like, okay, that's fine. And I also just want to add, I had my guide dog at this point. So I was used to people who had less sight than me. Maybe they had long canes and they didn't have a guide dog, or if I met up with people and they weren't used to the London area, they would hold on to my arm and ask to be guided. So I was used to that. I was absolutely fine with that because I've had experience with that in the past. But what I wasn't expecting was for her to hold onto my arm and then hold out her other arm to the girl behind her, and then likewise the girl behind her did the same thing. And literally it was like a blind conga. I thought any minute now we're going to start going, hey, let's all do the conga around the restaurant. You can imagine, right? Unity, my guide dog, is in front. I'm behind her holding onto the harness. A girl behind me is holding onto my arm. The girl behind her is holding onto her arm. And then the girl behind the other girl is holding onto the other girl's arm. So it's literally like a human train. We had to get from the tables to the other side of the restaurant to where the disabled toilets were. And some of you might ask, well, why didn't you ask for help from the staff at the restaurant? Now, it was very busy, which is why we didn't end up asking for help. I asked the waiter, where's the toilet? They gave me instructions of where the toilet was so that I could instruct my guide dog. I was my guide dog at the front, and the other girls all had their long canes out, so it was pretty abundantly clear that the people behind me were visually impaired, and we had to try and navigate our way, this long train of people, through all of these tables to get to the disabled toilet. Now, we couldn't have been sat at a worse spot. It was so busy in there that the only seats that were available were at the back. Getting through a restaurant when you're part of this like human train is no joke. It's no joke. And I was trying to weave my way through with Unity. Unity was looking back like, what the hell? Like, I am a guide dog, but you're taking the absolute mick. She was trying to navigate her way really slowly through these chairs and tables and all these diners and waiters to get to the disabled toilets, and she had to take a lot more time because I was walking a lot more slowly than I usually do because I had all these people who needed to be guided. Now the reason that I was chosen to lead this procession was because of the fact that I had the most sight out of everybody in the group, and also I had the guide dog. And as we were walking through this restaurant, Unity was taking her time looking back at me like, what on earth are you doing? We are trying to navigate our way through the restaurant and people start looking. You know, it's a thing, you get stared at when you have a visual impairment. I get stared at all the time having a guide dog. When I'm out with my friends and I've got Unity, but even if I've got my cane, people say the amount of stares you get is ridiculous. And to be honest, I'm used to it. Because I can't see them, because I'm focusing on other things, it doesn't really bother me because I don't notice it. Although I do know that people do stare because I am told all the time that people stare at me. So I just take no notice of it now. But even though I couldn't see the diners in the restaurant, I knew that they were all looking at us because there was just a silence that descended over the restaurant. It was like something out of a film. It went completely silent. It was so, you imagine, it was a Saturday afternoon. There was so much chatter and then it slowly like faded away. And then this one child I heard say, "Mummy, what are those people doing?" And obviously this mother couldn't answer because, you know, if it had just been me with my guide dog and the child would have asked about the dog, she could have said, "Oh, it's a special doggy for people who've got visual impairments who can't see very well. That dog is guiding that lady," which is what I hear all the time. But she didn't really know what to say because she was seeing me, a visually impaired woman with a guide dog, guiding these other visually impaired women who also had long canes across the restaurant. So I don't think she knew what to tell this child, and I could just hear her go, My face turned bright red and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm used to people staring at me, but this is a whole other level. I've guided everybody to the toilet, everybody uses the loo, and then we all make the journey back to the table. The same thing happens again, everybody stares, but there's a bit more chatter now. I think because everybody's realised that, oh, they wanted to use the toilet, so everybody's like, okay, right, fine. We sat back down and I was like, oh my god, what the hell, guys? And they are laughing at me because I said, I've never experienced that before. And they were like, oh my god, you've never done the blind conga, that's hilarious. Because it's a thing, people who are visually impaired do and can guide each other, and especially if you've got visually impaired friends and you will go out together, you will form this procession, especially if you're in a situation where you're all going to the same place, or you're going through a train station, or you're in a pub or a restaurant and you need to go to the toilet or anything like that. So it does actually happen. That was my first experience of the blind conga, as it was dubbed. But I have had experience since then, a lot of experience of guiding visually impaired people, visually impaired friends, and I've been out with them, and I am pretty much used to it now, and I'm pretty much used to the looks of incredulity that I get when I'm out, because people don't expect that when you've got a visual impairment that you can or will be guiding another visually impaired person, although it does happen. Now I remember a few years later, actually, when I went to an event, I was with a very large group of visually impaired people, and I told them of my first experience with the blind conga, and each of them had their own story to share about how either they had been in a situation like that or they had been the one to lead the blind conga. And I remember one person was totally blind, but she was put at the front because she knew the area the best. So it goes to show, people who are blind do actually lead each other. It does actually happen. So if you ever see a long group of people who are visually impaired walking through somewhere and they're all holding on to each other and it looks like they're doing the conga, they're all just trying to get by and live their life and do their thing. So just take no notice and just get on with whatever you're doing. There are loads of situations where this does happen, because if you imagine if you've got two visually impaired friends or a group of visually impaired friends and they come to stay with you, and maybe you go out for dinner or you go to an event and they don't know the layout of wherever you're going, they don't know where the toilet is, they don't know where things are because they've never visited it before and they don't have the orientation to know where things are, you are going to be the best person to help them because you know that layout, you know where things are because you go there all the time, or because you've been there before and you've been orientated around the area, so you know where things are and you can actually give them guidance. That is what has happened to me so many times when I've had visually impaired people come to visit me where I live in London. And London's a big place, right? There's loads of things, there's loads of attractions, and if you've never been there before, it can be a minefield. But because I've grown up in London, I often walk around the streets of London, and I have different apps that I use to navigate around London, like I use the Google Maps to help me. I go on walking tours as well, so I am used to the layout of London and I know where quite a lot of things are. So I've been able to actually guide visually impaired people around certain parts of London because I know where I'm going. And actually the roles have been reversed. I've actually had situations where I've been guided by visually impaired people when I don't know the layout of something or I'm not familiar with a certain area. So it works both ways. I have actually been guided by visually impaired people too, so it's not all just me. And I can tell you now, being guided by a visually impaired person is no big deal. And I'll tell you the reason for that. Being a visually impaired person myself, I can tell you now that I have to memorise a lot of things in my head. I have to remember so much about the layout of somewhere that I've visited because of the fact I can't always physically see it. So I have to know by memory where I'm going. So either counting steps or knowing tactile landmarks, or just being able to remember the roads and the maps of things in my mind, being able to remember directions and turnings. So I actually probably am as good a guide as a sighted person because of the fact that I have to remember so much detail in my head and so many navigational pieces of information to be able to actually get somewhere. And you know, I've done tours. I used to be a tour guide for my university, and I used to do campus tours on open days, and I do a lot of walking tours. I've been out with friends, and sometimes I've been the one who knows where I'm going more than they do, and they're sighted. So actually being guided by someone with a visual impairment is more probable than you think, because actually we might be more knowledgeable about where we're going than someone else is. So don't be afraid. If you ever need to be guided by a visually impaired person and you're visually impaired yourself, don't worry, because I can tell you now, I've guided lots of people with visual impairments and I haven't killed a single person yet. There you go, that is my video for today. I really hope you enjoyed it. So do let me know in the comments if you've had any experiences like this yourself. I would love to know your stories. I can tell you, when I do videos like this and you share your stories with me, I love reading them. So please do comment if you've had experiences with this yourself. I would love to read them. Thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment and subscribe, and to click the little notification bell when I make new videos. And I will see you guys in my next one. Bye!